Today we decided to go out to Fort Harrison out here in Virginia to check out this location, even though it's covered in snow. Primary reason is because this fort shows up a lot better in the snow. You can see the entire fortifications and all of the earthworks around here. Really good when you're out here during snow, or right after snow, especially after it's frozen over like it is. Kind of see there behind me. That's Fort Harrison. It's pretty cool. I'm going to flip this around so you can see the other side here in a second. Can't get much cooler than that. Check that out. Here's good old Fort Harrison on a nice frosty cold day. You can hear the ice crunching underneath my feet. It's amazing how the fortifications just kind of stand up and show themselves on a wintry day like this. About 30 degrees, maybe 20 degrees outside right now, somewhere in that neighborhood. And the snow has packed itself down with freezing rain and sleet. And so it's a solid icy patch out here on top of these fortifications, packed in real tight. I'm gonna see if I can't get around here safely so that we can check out this area. This is the outer wall of this fort here, Fort Harrison. And then the fortifications run the length of this field all the way down. And I'll get a good view of that here in a second too. I'll try to get around out here without slipping around. There's not too many locations I can get to right now in and around the Regiment area due to all the ice and snow that's out here from ice storm Fern, I guess is what they call it. But back there at that building in 1927, this location was purchased by the state of Virginia, Fort Harrison that is, in order to try to turn it into one of the first real state parks dedicated to the American Civil War. They purchased this land and they had a log cabin built back there, and that became the first headquarters for the national park out here in Richmond by 1936 when it was incorporated into the national park system. But before then, this fort was actually just simply a state park. Now what's amazing to me is this was the epicenter for everything when it comes to the national park system here in Richmond. And then it just slowly drifted towards downtown Richmond, and now the national park headquarters is based right beside, technically, beside the American Civil War Museum downtown. That's where you go and see some of the park rangers out there, and they have a museum out there dedicated to the Civil War too. It's not a very large one. But the history here is pretty interesting. It's tucked away kind of in the middle of nowhere, but you can tell that there was a lot of love put into this project here to make sure that these earthworks were saved. and they are still standing real tall. And we'll get around here and show you exactly what there is out here and try not to break our neck sliding on this ice. Now, for a major portion of this fort's life out here, the 4th Regiment of the USCT, or the U.S. Color Troops, actually occupied this fort. And it was heartily won by the Union soldiers, because the Confederates that had this fort put up a heck of a fight to keep it. As a result of the location and the counterattacks and all of that, there were a lot of soldiers in the 4th USCT that ended up with many different types of awards. The sign back there kind of shows one of the awards. It was given by Benjamin Butler to one of the soldiers, but it also shows a nice picture of the soldiers that would have probably been inside here that occupied this fort. As a result of their location, they were some of the first troops in Richmond when Richmond fell. This fort is pretty magnificent. If you take a look around behind me here, you can see the cross section that goes across here. This is kind of like a block, if you will. If a cannonball comes flying in here, it will hit this instead of going and traveling all the way across this fort. That's the intention of that. So we're gonna get around, kind of see some of the highlights of the walls here. There's a lot of interpretive signs inside this fort too. So it's gonna help us tell the story as we walk around inside of frosty cold Fort Harrison. Now, Lieutenant Harrison was the man that engineered this fort originally in 1862, and was part of a series of defense works that were put up out here to protect Richmond from being attacked during that first real year of combat out here. And it worked pretty good at that point. And it was held for a very long time, until about September of 1864. And then that's when the Union soldiers attacked it and were able to take this location from the Confederate Army. And General Robert E. Lee actually deplored the loss of this, because he thought that this was one of the strongest points in the works that were around Richmond. And he actually led a counterattack out here against this fort to try to take it back, but it was unsuccessful. I absolutely love really good signs at national parks like these. And this one here talks about that counterattack that I mentioned. And it tells that September 29th of 1864, that the Confederate Army threw 5 veteran brigades numbering 5,000 men into the attack. And it led to a disjointed Confederate attack here, ending disastrously with over 1,000 casualties at Fort Harrison. Fort Harrison, however, was renamed when they took this location and were able to reinforce it. It's actually named after a man named Burnham, who died as a result of combat. So the fact that it's Fort Harrison now, it's probably because originally this was Fort Harrison before it was taken by the Union Army. And can you really ask for anything better than this? I mean, I'm out here on a frozen day. The ice is so slippery, any turn can bust your tail on the ground. But nobody's around. I have the whole place to myself. I'm able to freely film and do whatever I want to out here and enjoy the quiet solitude of Fort Harrison and read these signs and kind of live in the moment as far as the history is concerned. It's a really neat place. I encourage you, if you ever get time to do something like this, even on a cold day, Fort Harrison is pretty quiet. There's not a lot of visitors that come out here anymore, and it really deserves to be visited. There were Medal of Honor recipients that attacked this fort and came over these walls and won the Medal of Honor as a result of the attack too. So definitely get out here and see this place. So here's something real neat. This sign talks about a unique photograph that was taken here November 28th of 1864 by T.C. Roche, who stood atop the Great Traverse behind us. So I'm assuming somewhere back here. Stood atop it to take the picture and caught a picture of the forward-looking walls here out towards Fort Beauregard off in the distance. And you could see a Union picket of the 7th United States Colored Troops, and then a Confederate stands atop Fort Beauregard way off in the distance. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to try to get a slow motion picture of this sign so you can see the picture a little better, and maybe stand off to the side to not capture the shadows here. and draw in real close to this to see if we can see some more details on this sign for this video. So that's a real neat picture there. A real neat look at the history that happened out here inside this fort, Fort Harrison. In the foreground you see U.S. color troops in there, probably either from the 4th Regiment or the 7th Regiment. And then off in the distance you definitely see a 7th Regiment color troop who is standing out front on picket duty, way off in the distance. Here between this fort and Fort Beauregard, which was another Confederate fort way out there. And you can actually see the Confederate soldiers atop there. It's kind of like what Ken Burns did with his documentaries to try to make pictures move, if you will. He pulled in real tight on these photographs to get the information, the details in these photographs to come out so that you can see what the history is in those photographs. He definitely picked up on a lot of things by doing that most people didn't see it at the time. Now, when you go back and look at those photographs in the Library of Congress, because of the way they were taken, there's so much detail in there for you to be able to see that the history really comes alive in the background of the photograph. It's real neat. I'm going to flip this camera around real quick so you can see what's going on in front of me. The sun shining off that ice there. And this fort is just beautiful. It's just coming up real good. Now this sign here talks about a bomb proof that was located roughly to the right of me. And thanks to the snow being here, it's very easy to see where the bomb proof itself actually collapsed in on itself with years and years of time passing by. You can see the soldiers there in the foreground just kind of casually standing around, and even up on the walls that are over to my left-hand side. It is pretty neat to see this photograph, and I'll pull in tight on this one too, so that you can see the, hopefully you can see all the stuff in the background as we're talking. And I'm going to pan over here and show you the depression in the ground too, and we'll kind of overlap the video so you can see kind of the depression and then the picture of the soldiers here that we're panning across real quick. So for a relative distance sort of thing, here's this photograph, and you can see this wall in the background, and that is likely the wall right here. And there's our bomb proof, which was likely that depression in the ground right there. And I'll walk past so that you can see that sunken in hole in the snow. This right here is where that picture is. We're talking soldiers just kind of standing there, and then off to the side here, wooden railings up here, the soldiers sitting up on top. It's really neat. Let's see if I can't overlap that photo here so you can kind of see the way the picture would have been. And look at the details in this photograph as it's overlaying here, the soldiers in the background and everything. It's something else. Is there a better way to kill time on a wintry, cold, frosty day? I don't think so. I'm out here at Fort Harrison in Virginia, outside of Richmond, in the Richmond National Battlefield Park System. And because the snow is so thick and so tightly packed because of the ice, you can just see all of the fortifications just sticking out of the ground. They're just really coming into the picture in a way that they normally wouldn't, because it's kind of camouflaged out here when you're trying to take photographs. On a normal day, there's tons of grass sticking up, foliage and things like that, and this stuff just kind of blends into the background of a video or a photograph. So this is pretty neat to see out here. I hope you guys like it. Now, EOC Ord ended up falling wounded out here during the big push from Fort Harrison, and they were trying to bust open that gap that they had created out here even wider by hitting Gilmer and Fort Hoke, and I believe Johnson was one of them too. And as they were going through here, it just didn't work out. They had to fall back to this position and eventually settle in for winter quarters. Over here is a portion of Confederate earthworks. This is the completed Confederate portion of that the sign was talking about earlier, and it immediately stops off here to the left-hand side. And then the Union portion was the front-facing wall over here that they had to put in place to protect themselves from the Confederates coming in this direction, because Fort Beauregard and everything is off in that direction over there. So we're going to walk past this Confederate portion of earthworks and see what else is up here over the hill. So how does a soldier get his water if he's stuck inside of a fort and he can't get out to a water source? Well, one easy answer for that. They dig a well. They have what remains of the well out here, and it's got a wooden fence up around it and a sign that talks about the fact that that well was probably actually dug by Confederate soldiers out here in defense of Fort Harrison. And then eventually it was captured by the Union soldiers and used for their thirst quenching, if you will. So it's a pretty big hole in the ground back there, and it is very cool to see this stuff still up. Just look at all of this as we go along here in this fort. This is really cool. And if it's not too slippery, I'm going to see if I can't get on the outside of this fort too, to see the banks on the opposite side there, because like I said, it's really hard to get this stuff to show up in photographs and videos, even during the fall when the leaves are gone, because the walls are not super high anymore, as you can tell by looking at the Confederate wall over here where this gun is placed. But on the outside, the walls seem to be pretty tall. But interior wise, all of that grass blends right in, all of this over here. It blends right into the rest of it. And so when you're trying to take a video or photograph out here, it's almost impossible to get it to show up. So we're gonna go out there and see what we can see too. Now, if you're a Union soldier out here coming up against this fort, it's not an easy task. You can see the cannon here placed in position of the wall where it would have been placed. And just over this wall, you can kind of see the downward slope of this wall. It used to be a lot higher. And you can see the position out there in the woods kind of comes uphill. These soldiers are attacking uphill to get to this fort and trying to take it by storm, which means a lot of death. A lot of maimed soldiers trying to take this wall. and coming up over this wall. Matter of fact, way back there in that corner of the wall was where a soldier actually came up over that wall and attacked so ferociously and so bravely that he ends up winning the Medal of Honor, or getting awarded the Medal of Honor for his actions over there. And we'll go out there to that position and put that in this video too. Fort Harrison's a pretty unique place. It's definitely worth a visit. The place I'm located right now is just down the way from that cannon that we were at earlier. There's that cannon. And there's the Confederate earthworks all back through this direction here. Now, when the Union Army took this location out here, General Grant ends up inside this fort about 3 hours after they took the location. And according to the sign that's right here, there is a story here about him sitting on the ground in this location, somewhere roughly here, where there used to be earthworks traversing the area. And he was sitting down to write his report, essentially, on what happened here. And as he's sitting here, a shell comes bursting overhead, a cannonball, because the Confederates have been shelling this place ever since they lost it from across the way over there. And one man remarked that the shell had burst over top of him, and everybody instinctively ducked, and he didn't even budge. He didn't flinch. He just continued to write. A lot of people noticed that later in life, too, when he was sitting down to write his memoirs and everything that he did, that he was always so focused that he would sit down, and sometimes he would get up in a hunched position in order to continue to write and continue what he was doing, almost as if he was transitioning from one location to another location in the seated position. So I don't know if some of that has to do with the amount of combat he saw leading up to this point in 1864, or if that was just the type of man he was. He was not moved, and not easily moved, that's for sure. So coming off this trail here, there's a sign that tells you to go down below at Fort Harrison here. I'm going to try to get down here without falling, but you can tell it's downhill. And we're going to make our way around the corner of this fort to the location where that Medal of Honor recipient came across that wall, and see if we can't get some good video over there to add to this video, make it a little bit more interesting when we're talking about Fort Harrison and the bravery that we honor out here at this location for the soldiers that fought and died in and around these fortifications. And as you come around this fort corner here, through that midsection that they cut out so you can get onto the quarter-mile loop trail, you just see this huge section of the fort wall just jetting out, just sticking out. And it gives you a real crazy visual as you come around the corner there. This portion, the Confederate portion, like I said, was much higher before. And the fact that it's still here today and looking like it looks, it's pretty amazing for anything to be up since 1860, anything. It's especially made of dirt. And it has a lot to do with the fact that they preserved this as early as they did. And then on top of preserving it, they made sure that people stayed off top of it. That's kind of key to anything, really. If you go to Williamsburg, you'll see fortifications out there where people have constantly tread on top of them. And you actually see the paths where the dirt has turned like chalky white almost, where the fort is wearing down, the fortifications are. So you have to stay off top of stuff like this. And even though it's very intriguing and makes you want to climb it like a kid, you really can't do that. So very good for Richmond for taking care of this. Again, they've done a really good job with the signage out here at Fort Harrison telling the story. There's a sign right here in front of me, and it's talking about the approach from the James River. But what's more unique about this sign is the fact that they have a picture taken from that position to show the approach from the James River. And it says, approaching from the James River, Union soldiers of Stannard's division suffered their greatest loss in crossing the open ground behind you. Confederate cannon along this wall delivered mighty blasts that knocked horrible holes in the attacking formations. But once they reached here, survivors used the slopes for protection before climbing up and over Fort Harrison's wall. After the attack, the killed and wounded soldiers covered the ground between the camera and the fort. By the time this photograph was taken, Federal soldiers had already begun to demolish the old Confederate wall And the wall that the Federals assaulted was almost twice as tall as seen today. So that's pretty amazing. And I overlaid that photograph right there in the picture for you so you could see the kind of the detail, and hopefully my shadow didn't get into it too much to block out the details of the grounds that were used to attack this fort. Now we're making our way along this slippery slope here out to that location I was talking about, where they highlight a Medal of Honor recipient's actions out here at Fort Harrison. I really hope the crunchy ice in the background is not too much for this video. But I always like going across these bridges, beautiful spots at the national parks, and I'm definitely making a dent in the ice right now. Oh man. Guess it couldn't handle 180 pounds. Directly in front of me is a sign that says "Storming the Fort," and it's talking about Captain Cecil Clay. Captain Cecil Clay commanded the 58th Pennsylvania Infantry. On September 29th of 1864, he ends up scaling this wall right here in front of us. And when he gets to the top, he ends up basically snagging a banner up there. And he's standing on top of this fort wall trying to encourage his men to get up and over this wall. As a result, he takes some pretty severe wounds here at this wall. As a result of his bravery, coming from the low-lying lands below us here, which go all the way out towards the James River and up this wall, he is awarded the Medal of Honor. There's another description there on the sign that talks about the man from Connecticut, really a quote from him talking about them scaling this wall and how they were using their bayonets to try to get up over this wall. And the wall itself used to be a lot higher. Even the National Park sign ahead that we just talked about said so. So you can see how high it is right now. Imagine you're having a pair of brogans on, which is basically some bald leather with a horseshoe on the bottom, hobnails if you will, and that's about it for your feet. You have nothing to scale the wall with, not a ladder, not a piece of wood or anything, and you're using your bare hands and a bayonet to get over top of this wall. So you're scrambling and scratching as much as you can to try to get up and over this thing before people are poking their guns over the top of that wall, shooting and aiming down at you. And then imagine the soldier on the inside here waiting for the eventual moment that they get over this wall. It's pretty wild stuff. One of the major benefits that Grant had in this location in 1864 was he had a massive army. He didn't have to stay put in one location or stretch his army thin in the surrounding fortifications to try to protect the city or any of that. He had an army protecting Washington. He had an army in the Western Theater fighting the Confederate army there. His army here was twice the size of the Confederate army, and sometimes as large as 3 times the size. So you take that army and you're able to split it up. You can fight on any front, in any location, and put up a formidable fight and still be able to protect things like your supply line, your telegraphs, the roads coming in and out of your location. And even with all of that, he was still dealing with a major fight on his hands with the Confederate Army. It was just a matter of time before he made the right move that would trap Robert E. Lee into making the wrong move. And this happens when they end up in the trenches around Petersburg. Now here's something that's huge. It's called the Great Traverse. And it's seen in that photograph that I showed you earlier. Look at the massive size of this thing. This isn't a natural hill. This is man-made. This was put here. You see that gentle slope that goes up? It's gigantic. And on the other side here, some pretty interesting stuff too. And we're going to go over there and check out that piece of artillery that's laid out in the field and talk about the history behind it. This is wild. So on this sign in front of me, there's some pretty daunting stats about this fort here. And I'm at a location where a lot of hand-to-hand combat happened here. Matter of fact, on the parapet in front of me is where Burnham died. He received a mortal wound there, coming up over that wall. And as a result, that's why this place's name is changed over to Burnham, because he ends up dying here in this fort. But according to the stats here with the National Park, it says that General George J. Sanders' division lost about 750 men killed and wounded in the attack at Fort Harrison. Butler's army lost an additional 2,200 men in the day's fighting at other nearby forts at New Market Heights. Confederate losses for September 29th are estimated at 500, including nearly all 200 defenders of Fort Harrison. That means that the men inside this fort probably fought until the very last minute, and nearly all of them were lost as a result of the fighting here. 5,000 men stretched out across the field in front of this location, coming across this field to attack this fort with 200 men inside. The hand-to-hand combat that happened in this location was pretty fierce. And it's amazing that any of them probably made it out of here alive, or made it out of here anything less than with a wound. So I don't know that any of the Confederate defenders that were inside this fort made it out of here without a wound or without a scratch. But this is a pretty amazing place to stand and think about history here. You can see it all right here behind me. I'll turn this camera around and we'll talk a little bit more as we go towards that field artillery piece. Well, I've walked out there to that field artillery piece and there's no signage or anything out there to indicate what this is. I'm assuming that based on the painting that's on this picture that was done in the 1960s, that possibly it was a field artillery piece that might have been here during the battle, because it looks a lot like this. Could be wrong. I'm going to look that information up online, and if I find more information about this piece, I will put it in the description of this video so that you can see for yourself where that piece came from and why it's here on a piece of wood out there. Well, with Fort Harrison in the background, I think it's about time to get in the car and get warmed up and head on down the road to another adventure. I hope you enjoyed the video, and thanks for tuning in. To all you members out there, thanks for subscribing and being a member. And to everybody else that's watching this video, if you made it this far, you must have liked something that you saw. So please click the like button, hit that thumbs up, subscribe, and post a comment. Even if it's a comment on something I could have done better, it helps me out. Until next time, this is History with Waffles.